Topic number one for today. The deadline has passed. Guys have made the decisions, whether they're in the portal or not. There's definitely a few more pieces out there that can make decisions, but a lot of people are starting to release their way too early top 25s with a lot more pieces put into place. We headed over to our good friend, Jeff Borzello, friend of the program, friend of ours, who released his way too early top 25. And he had Kansas number one overall. And I want to dive into that a little bit deeper because there's been a lot of back and forth about whether Kansas is number one, whether Bama's number one. Some people are even say that UConn deserves to be number one. But diving into this quickly here, Ralph, what is your initial reactions of this way too early? And I don't know if you have finished yours yet for Heat
Yep.
Check or not. Did you already release that?
Heat check as a whole, we have not, but
Okay.
I released mine on Twitter. I had Alabama number one.
You did have Alabama number one.
I
Okay, so
did have Alabama number one.
okay, let's dive into that a little bit because I too had Alabama number one. So what for you, what puts Alabama over Kansas in this case for the number one spot?
Honestly, and I know this does not make for good podcasting, but I think either one is fine and defendable. If you
No,
go outside,
no,
if you go
no, no,
outside,
Ralph. No, no, no. You pick the number one. There's no 1A, 1B, and you stand on bit. No, I'm kidding. You stand on business.
the
But
the reason why I went with Alabama is you have the core back of last season's Final Four team. And I know there were some pieces that are lost, Rylan Griffin, chief among them. But bringing back Mark Sears, bringing back Grant Nelson, like that's huge, especially if you get the Grant Nelson who continues to progress the way he did the back half of the season. Like you suddenly have a group of stars. You bring in some elite transfers. You bring in some elite freshmen. Bama can go 10 to 12 deep if they want to with guys that contributed big minutes on a Final Four team last year. Like
right.
that is really, really strong. Kansas doesn't have as much depth. I think Kansas probably has more known pieces. I still have some questions of how good a Hunter Dickinson, KJ Adams front court can be. While I love both of those players, again, if we're picking holes and splitting hairs here, that's a question. AJ Store playing, I don't want to say winning basketball, but buying into the more team part of Kansas. I thought there were times at Wisconsin where he was a little bit more selfish now to get his. Now Kansas needs him and somebody to do that. So I don't know if that's going to be a terrible thing. And I don't think the bench is as deep. I think the bench is certainly upgraded, and I think Kansas is a Final Four caliber team. But again, you're splitting hairs here. That's the difference for me between the two. And I had UConn at 3, but if you want to make a case for any of those 3, I would listen to it. Anybody outside of those 3, I don't even think is an opinion. I think it's just wrong.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I don't think that you can argue with when you look at what those three schools have done, transfer portal, recruiting wise, and then just the caliber of head coaches at those three places. You have Oates,
Yeah.
you have Self, and then you have Hurley. And honestly, we're all messing up right now by putting Hurley third and UConn third. Like their early bulletin board material, they're gonna
Yeah.
drive that into the ground. But another thing that I kind of wanted to get your opinion on, and where I was coming from as well, is that, and this is nothing against Kansas's roster. I love Kansas's roster.
Yeah.
Is there any inkling of are we worried about just kind of just the dynamics of the team? Like AJ Store is a guy who's has so much around him because of the transfer portal, and he's been to like 9 different schools in 9 different years, dating back to high school. Hunter Dickinson is like this enigma of a college basketball player and personality. Is there any worry about kind of what the personalities look like on that team? And now there's personalities on every team. That's every basketball team. There's going to be
Yeah.
personalities on Bama's team. They're going to have a guy who's probably their 10th guy that could start
Yeah.
at a bunch of other schools. So my main question is, what is your biggest worry about Kansas, which maybe makes them number 2 in your eyes?
I think chemistry is one of them, and you'd be naive to think that that's not going to play an issue or a potential issue, right? Because it is one, you're adding a whole bunch of new guys. I don't know how big of an issue it will be for a couple of reasons. Number one, your point guard is Juwan Harris, who prefers not to shoot.
Mm-hmm.
He's not going to be mad if guys are quote unquote taking his shots. He's actually going to prefer that, right? Rylan Griffin and AJ Storr, I think, can coexist on the wing because Griffin is more of the 3 and D, catch and shoot guy. Storr needs the ball in his hands. That works. KJ Adams is perfectly fine, or at least appears to be perfectly fine, being a role player, glue guy sort of option.
Mhm.
I think that fits his game. I think what you're going to get into is a potential AJ Storr, Hunter Dickinson um, clash of who is the guy who gets the shots, who gets the ball, who gets the touches. Right. That's the potential friction there. Now, I don't think Dickinson comes back for a 5th year if he's not willing to put that stuff aside. I don't think Storr goes to Kansas if he's not willing to put that stuff aside. I don't think Bill Self puts up with that crap, particularly after what happened this past year. And there are very few people in the country who can manage egos with the kind of credibility that he has as Bill Self. It's almost like the Pat Riley of college basketball to me with Bill Self, where he's just great at knowing how that works and kind of flexing his own when he needs to get guys to stay in line. Um, but there are some potential issues there that I don't know if Alabama has. And this is on paper, but Bama is deeper. I think the pieces fit together better, and we saw them have more success last season. So if you're comparing cores, like I'm going with Bama's.
Yeah, I think I feel the same way. You just can't argue. And this, like I said, the three teams that we stated, those are the teams that I feel like belong there. But like when you just go through Bama's roster and you get to like guy 12 and you're like, this is the 12th guy? Like, what? This isn't fair what Nate Oates has
J-
done.
Jaron Stevenson came back, and it was like a huge deal because you love to have Jaron Stevenson. We go to do the Alabama State of the Program video. I'm looking at Jim Root's roster sheet. He's projected to be the 9th or 10th guy in the rotation. You're just like, what?
It's literally crazy. I was honestly surprised he even signed up to come back. To be honest with you, like
Yeah.
I don't know where his minutes are going to come from, but I mean, good on Nate Oates, good on them for doing that. That's kind of why I have Bama number one. It's going to be interesting to see how that discourse works out with the way too earlys. But also looking through the rest of this, I'd like to get one team on here that you're maybe higher on, or one team that you're lower on
Mm.
out of the top 25. So let's start with one team you're maybe higher on that than other people.
Iowa State. I am very, very high on Iowa State this season. We talked about this top three, right? Bama, UConn, and Kansas. I think they're the clear top three.
Mhm.
I think Iowa State is the clear number 4 and the best team of that second tier. A lot of it is who you bring back, but the way they played last season, and again, they're returning most of the core. Their guard trio of Lipsy, Gilbert, and Momcilovic, I think, is a difference maker for them, given the way they played defense. I think last year everybody fell in love with Houston, the way Houston played defense and what Jamal Shed brought to the table offensively. Like that was the quintessential Houston experience.
Hmm.
Iowa State was the exact same way. Their name just wasn't Houston. Like you watch them play, they played the exact same kind of swarming defense that suffocated teams. They went through offensive ruts, but then they also went through offensive spurts that completely flipped games. You had a number of guys who did that. So, like in your mind, take the core of a Houston team that won the Big 12 tournament, as good as they were last season, May the second weekend, and brings everybody back. You're going to be over the moon with expectations for that Houston team. I think you slapped the Iowa State label on that, and it's causing people to view it with some hesitation. And I get it. I understand that to an extent, but I think this team is going to be elite defensively, as always. They're going to have as much offensive firepower as any Iowa State team has had under Otzelberger.
Mm.
I think they're a very real Final Four contender, and it feels weird to say they're a national championship favorite because again, they're not in the top 3 group, but I wouldn't be afraid to put that label on.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So I know a lot of people have been maybe trying to inch Baylor ahead of Iowa State. I like that pick by you. I'm gonna go to. All right. I'm gonna stay strong with this one. I came in with this one. I'm not gonna change up late. Borzello has Arizona at 9. I think Arizona should be higher than 9. I truly do. And this is where I'm coming from on this one.
Yes.
I get it. I get the Caleb Love thing. I get the stigma. It's not even a stigma because it is earned. Like the shot selection,
Yeah.
the decisions, everything that he does really does seem to kind of hurt this team at the worst times. But I think we need to stop acting like they didn't just get an All-American back. Like they got an All-American back who averaged
Yeah.
18 points, 5 rebounds, and 4 assists last season, shooting the highest percentage he shot in his career at 42%, and he shot 34% from three. And like, yes, those aren't like the most greatest percentages, but they're not just getting back a complete nothing. And yes, he shot bad in the Clemson game. You know who else shot bad in the Clemson game? Kylan Boswell. He was 1 for 6. Pell Larson was 2 for 9. Kashad Johnson was 3 for 8. That's not that awful, but it was a lot of missed layups. Like he wasn't the only reason that Arizona lost basketball games. And I think getting him
Mm.
back, Jaden Bradley being that steady point guard, I think he's better than Colin Boswell. That just kind of straight up. KJ Lewis, I think, is an NBA player. I think he's going to break out this season. Trey Townsend's going to be great. Like
Yeah.
I feel great about what he's going to do. I've seen what he's done against higher level competition at Oakland. I think he's going to be perfect at the 4 spot in Tommy Lloyd's system. And then Krivas is a guy who I think can take another step too. So I think people have gone just a little bit too far south on Arizona and Caleb Love for my liking because of Caleb Love when they're not realizing what this guy is, which is an All-American level type player. So even though they are at 9, I would put them even higher than that.
I like that. And I think too, we are going to look back on their transfer class, particularly Townsend and Delorso, who they
Mhm.
brought in from Campbell, as one of, if not the best transfer class in the country in terms of the impact they're going to have next season. Um, we just had two Big 12 teams, and they weren't Baylor, Houston, or Kansas.
The Big 12 is going to be absolutely disgustingly good this year, and it's actually I think it's gonna scare me. So on the flip side of that, is there one team that maybe Borzello or other guys are ranking higher that you would have lower on your list?
He had Arkansas 16,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
So I had Arkansas 21 in mine. And to be honest, I only had Arkansas 21 because I'm scared I'm doubting them too much, but I don't see it really with this Arkansas team,
Hmm.
to be perfectly honest. I kind of brought it up at the beginning. They're the same kind of build as Kentucky last year without their two or three best players. That's a problem, particularly their two or three best shooters. Like one of the reasons that Kentucky team was so good is they didn't turn the ball over and they shot a ton of threes at a high clip. Well, this team, you take the shooting out, you throw in some questions at point guard and ball handling, and if you're going to repeat that turnover rate, there are defensive questions in the middle behind Jonas Adu. Like you're relying on him to shore up a lot of things
Yeah.
that I I don't know if he's going to necessarily be able to do. I'm sure Arkansas will be fine. I think they'll be good. There's too much talent on that roster for them to not be. But this Calipari bump that they're getting, I don't see it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And that roster, obviously, there's still some spots to fill. I know they're in the Coleman Hawkins sweepstakes, so we'll kind of see where it goes. But it does seem they are like, you know,
I
I
reserve the right to retract this if they land on Coleman Hawkins.
okay, I will give you that out. But like part of the reason why Kentucky lost was like some of the players that were on that team last season, and they got the players that like weren't the best. Like DJ Wagner was a part of the problem last year. Like I'm not saying
Yeah.
he's gonna be bad, but he was a part of the issue. Even guys like Adou Thiero were a part of the issue. So like you
Yeah.
just can't forget that when you're looking at this. So I do like that. Um,
I think the idea of those guys right now, we'll see what happens, but I think the idea of those guys is better than the actual on-court product right now.
yeah, I'd agree with you on that one. I was gonna go. I'm gonna send a shout out just to Purdue because I know Greg probably would have picked them. Purdue's at 15 in this list. I knew he would have probably wanted them higher with Braden Smith and those guys back. But I'm
Yep.
actually gonna go with another Big Ten team. Borzello had Indiana at 18. 18 seems a little bit. I think that they should be a little bit higher up on this list. I think that they're I'm sorry. I think they're a little bit maybe too up there on this list. And
Okay.
this is gonna. I love Indiana. I truly do. I think the roster is really good, and I think that they have done great job in the transfer portal. But unfortunately, the game is the game. I feel the way I do. I've seen this story before with Mike Woodson, man. Like they win the offseason. Everybody
Mhm.
feels good about them. And as they should be. I think they really should feel good about their about Indiana and the Hoosiers. But to me, I would feel more comfortable, and this is nitpicking at this point. I feel more comfortable with them at like 22, something around
Yeah.
there. There's some question marks. The shooting is definitely going to be an issue. I'm not worried about them. I think they could figure it out. I'm not saying they're going to be bad by any means like that, but I would just have them closer to like 2021. I think if I was ranking them.
Yeah. I had them 15 from a purely on paper standpoint, and I felt gross about it. I don't have much faith in Mike Woodson, but the talent is there for this team to be pretty good.
Yeah. And look, honestly, going through this top 25, it has me pretty excited for college basketball season and the talent
It
on these
does.
rosters. It should be a really good year. But all right, let's go ahead and move on to topic number 2.